Welcome back to the deep dive. You know those moments when you make a decision and think, wait, why did I do that?
Happens to the best of us.
Well, get ready to unlock some serious self-knowledge because today we're diving into the fascinating world of behavioral economics.
That's right.
It's all about understanding those hidden forces that shape our choices.
Even when we think we're being perfectly rational.
And based on your notes and reading list, you've been digging into Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational,
It's a classic.
which is chock full of aha moments about how our brains work or sometimes don't work.
Yeah, real eye-opener.
All right, let's unpack this first big idea.
Okay.
Everything is relative, even when it shouldn't be.
Hmm.
Take that classic example with the Economist magazine subscriptions.
Oh, yeah.
Ariely presents three options.
Okay.
Web only for $59,
Mm-hmm.
print only for $125,
Uh-huh.
and both web and print for $125.
No.
You immediately think, wait, why would anyone choose print? Only when the combo's the same price. It makes that combined subscription seem like such a steal.
Exactly. That's the principle of relativity in action.
Oh.
Our brains don't see things in isolation.
Okay.
We're constantly comparing, even if the comparison doesn't make logical sense.
So instead of thinking, do I really need both web and print?
Right.
Our brains are yelling, deal, must grab.
It's like that, yeah.
It's overriding the logic.
This isn't just about sneaky magazine marketers, though. This principle pops up everywhere.
I was just thinking that, like, where else does this play out?
Like, think about how TV salespeople arrange their displays.
But
They'll often put a ridiculously expensive TV next to the one they really want to sell.
to make it look better.
You're not evaluating if that TV's a good price.
Mm.
You're just relieved it's not that other price.
I see.
The decoy effect.
Mm,
By introducing an inferior option, they make their target seem far more appealing.
got it.
And restaurant menus do this all the time. That ridiculously overpriced lobster diff.
Yeah, nobody orders it.
Nobody orders it, but suddenly that $45 steak looks reasonable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's all about shifting your frame of reference.
Now, here's where this gets really fascinating.
Okay.
It's not just about spending more money.
Right.
Ariely actually did research using photographs.
Hmm.
He showed people sets of 3 pictures,
Okay.
2 average-looking people,
Mhm.
and then a slightly less attractive version of one of them.
Interesting.
What do you think happened?
I'm intrigued. Tell me.
People consistently chose the average-looking person whose photo was alongside their less attractive counterpart.
It makes you wonder how much we do that subconsciously in our everyday lives.
Yeah, it's like our brains can't help but compare, and that less attractive photo became the new baseline,
Right.
making the other person seem more appealing even though objectively they hadn't changed.
Exactly. It's a powerful illustration of how relative judgments work. And, this actually has implications for online dating profiles.
Okay, hold on. I need to hear this. What does this mean for choosing profile pictures?
Well, if you're going for a group shot, it might be worth considering who's standing next to you.
So maybe not your most stunning friend. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Mostly. Okay, moving on to another fascinating quirk of human behavior.
Okay.
It's something we've all experienced. The irresistible pull of free.
Oh, yes. The zero price effect, as Ariely calls it.
Because seriously, who hasn't gone a little nuts over free stuff, even if it's something we don't really need?
It's hard to resist.
I know I've ended up with enough promotional pens and keychains to last a lifetime.
Right.
And it's not just trinkets. Think about free trials or buy one, get one free
That's-
offers.
Mm-hmm.
These tactics tap into our deep-seated aversion to loss.
Mm-hmm.
With free, there's no perceived risk.
I see.
It's like our brains shut off the do I really need this function and go straight into grab it mode.
Makes sense.
Ariely brilliantly illustrates this with his chocolate experiment.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
They offered people Lent truffles and Hershey's Kisses.
Okay.
First, they priced the truffle at 15 cents
Mm-hmm.
and the kiss at 1 cent.
Makes sense.
Most people chose the truffle, which makes sense. Better chocolate, slightly higher price.
Sure.
But then they dropped the price of the truffle to 14 cents and made the kisses free. And guess what? People went crazy for the free kisses.
Even though
the relative price difference was the same, the power of free completely changed people's behavior.
Wow. It really shows you the power of free. It's like free short circuits our usual decision-making process.
And this can have huge implications for, well, everything.
It can.
Think about how we get sucked into those free shipping offers.
You might end up spending more just to reach that free shipping threshold.
Or how about those free samples that make us stand in ridiculously long lines?
It's like we can't help ourselves.
It makes you wonder, is it really free if we're giving up our time and energy?
That's a good point. It all comes back to that zero price effect. Free isn't just a discount. It's a completely different psychological experience.
Okay, and speaking of psychological experiences,
Yeah.
let's talk about anchors, because this is where things start to get really mind-bending.
Okay.
You know that story Ariely tells about the Pearl King, Salvador Isel?
Yes, a classic example of how to create value seemingly out of thin air.
He had these Tahitian black pearls that nobody wanted, they were dull, and nobody knew what to do with them. So what did he do?
I'm listening.
He partnered with Harry Winston, the famous jeweler, put them in his fancy Fifth Avenue store window, and slapped on a ridiculously high price tag.
He went high to create demand.
That's wild. But I guess it worked, because now Tahitian black pearls are a luxury item.
It worked brilliantly. By anchoring the pearls to a high price, he created a perception of value that stuck.
Interesting.
Just like those baby geese that imprint on the first moving object they see, we humans tend to latch onto the first price we see as a reference point.
So we're all a little bit goslings when it comes to pricing.
Kind of, yeah.
We fixate on that initial impression, and it colors all our future perceptions.
That's the concept of arbitrary coherence. The initial price might be completely random, but once it's in our minds, it creates a framework for how we value things within that category.
And everything else is judged against that.
Exactly.
So that first time we see a price, it's like this mental anchor gets dropped.
Yeah.
But how does that work in real life?
Well,
It's not like we have someone whispering prices in our ear before we buy something.
true, but
Or maybe we do. Subliminal advertising music plays first. Just kidding.
aha.
But seriously, how do these anchors get set without us realizing it?
Think about how often we're exposed to prices.
Oh,
Manufacturers suggested retail prices. Those compare at prices you see in ads, even sale prices.
right.
They all become anchors. We might not even be aware of it,
Yeah.
but our brains are constantly taking in this information and using it as a reference point.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But Ariely also did this crazy experiment
Oh, yeah.
where he asked students to write down the last 2 digits of their social security numbers and then bid on random items like wine chocolate and even computer gadgets.
It sounds bizarre, right?
It does.
But it brilliantly demonstrates the power of anchoring, because those social security digits, completely arbitrary numbers, by the way, influenced how much people were willing to pay.
Wait, are you telling me people with higher social security numbers bid more for the exact same items?
That's exactly what happened. It shows how susceptible we are to these seemingly irrelevant anchors. Our brains try to make sense of the information we're given, even if it's completely random.
So basically, we're all just walking around with these invisible price tags in our heads
Yeah.
based on all sorts of random things.
In a way, yes. But the good news is that once we understand how anchoring works,
Yeah.
we can start to counteract it.
Okay, so how do we break free from these mental anchors? Do we need to, go on a digital detox and live in a price tag-free commune?
That's one approach, but probably not necessary. One of the simplest things you can do is be aware of the power of anchors.
Okay.
When you see a price, don't just blindly accept it. Question it.
Don't let it become the gospel truth of what that item is worth.
Right. Ask yourself, is this a fair price?
Okay.
What value am I really getting? What else could I do with that money?
That's a good point.
Broaden your frame of reference.
So instead of just comparing prices within the same store or website,
Right.
maybe think about how that purchase compares to other things I could spend my money on.
Exactly. Like, would I rather have these fancy new headphones or a weekend getaway? Sometimes just shifting our perspective can help us break free from those anchors.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I guess if all else fails, maybe take a break, step away from the situation. So
Sure.
if I'm feeling pressured by a salesperson or
Yeah.
just overwhelmed by choices, sometimes walking away for a bit helps me think more clearly.
That's great advice. Giving yourself time and space to reflect can make a big difference. Okay, so we've talked about relativity, the power of free, and the sneaky influence of anchors.
Right.
But there's one more fascinating element to this whole behavioral economics puzzle.
Okay.
And it's the idea that we live in two different worlds. One governed by social norms,
Okay.
and the other by market norms.
Oh, this is where things get really interesting. And maybe a little bit awkward, because Ariely kicks off this section with that hilarious and cringeworthy scenario of offering to pay your mother-in-law for Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh yeah, a classic example of what not to do.
Yeah.
Because you've stumbled into a social situation where market norms simply don't apply.
Oh.
It's like trying to pay your friend for a ride home.
Right.
It feels wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like you're reducing the relationship to a mere transaction.
Exactly. And that can damage the relationship. So we have these two worlds we navigate.
Mm-hmm.
The warm, fuzzy world of social norms where we do things out of kindness, reciprocity, a sense of community.
Okay.
And then the colder, more transactional world of market norms where everything has a price tag and clear costs and benefits.
Right.
And the key takeaway here is that you can't mix those two worlds without causing some serious friction.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going. So how do we know which set of rules to apply in different situations?
It's tough.
Sometimes it feels like everything has a price tag these days.
That's the challenge. But Ariely's research gives us some great insights into how these two worlds operate. He did this really fascinating experiment
Right?
where he asked people to do this super boring, task-dragging circles across a computer screen for hours on end.
Sounds riveting.
Right. But here's the thing. He divided people into 3 groups.
Okay.
One group got paid $5,
Okay.
another got paid 50 cents,
Uh-huh.
and the third group was simply asked to do it as a favor.
Interesting. Okay, I'm guessing the group that got paid $5 worked the hardest.
You would think so, right?
Well, more money, more motivation.
Actually, that's not what happened.
Really?
The group who was asked to do it as a favor worked just as hard as the $5 group.
Wow.
And they both outperformed the 50-cent group.
Whoa, that is surprising. So doing something out of the goodness of your heart can be just as motivating as cold, hard cash.
Sometimes even more so.
But what about that 50-cent group? Why did they slack off?
It's fascinating. Even a small amount of money can shift us from a social mindset into a market mindset.
Oh, I see.
Suddenly, instead of, I'm doing this to be helpful,
Yeah.
it becomes, I'm doing this for the money.
Right.
And that can actually reduce our intrinsic motivation.
So what's the takeaway here?
Yeah.
If we want people to go the extra mile, skip the cash and just ask nicely.
Well, it's not always quite that simple, but it is worth considering. In fact, Ariely found that giving a gift, even something small like a Snickers bar, can be a really effective way to motivate people.
It's like that warm, fuzzy feeling of receiving a present. It taps into that social norm of reciprocity.
Exactly. But there's a catch. As soon as you mention the cost of that gift, you cross the line.
You've brought market norms into the equation.
All right.
Oh, I see. So it's about the gesture, not the monetary value.
Yeah.
If you're trying to maintain a social relationship, stick with a gesture of goodwill without putting a price tag on it.
Right. Now, all this talk about social versus market norms has got me thinking about how companies interact with us.
Because these days, so many brands are trying to be our friend, right?
They are.
Like, we're a community. We're in this together. We get you.
Exactly. And as we've seen, there's a real danger in mixing those messages.
Right.
Social relationships are built on trust.
Yeah.
And they're fragile.
If a company messes up,
Right.
like raising prices unexpectedly or having terrible customer service, that friendship can vanish pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And then it's back to that purely transactional relationship. No more warm fuzzies.
Okay, so this brings us to a really important question.
Okay.
How do companies successfully navigate this balance between social and market norms?
That is the question.
I mean, they have to make a profit, right?
That's the tricky part. It's about being genuine and walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Because if companies don't live up to those social expectations,
Right.
they risk alienating their customers and driving them away.
Yeah.
And sometimes the consequences can be pretty dramatic and unexpected. It's like that daycare study Ariely talks about.
Oh, right.
They were having a problem with parents picking up their kids late.
Yeah.
So they decided to implement a fine.
I mean...
You'd think that would solve the problem, right?
Right.
Introduce a financial penalty, and people will be more likely to be on time.
Makes sense.
A classic market norm solution.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened at all. In fact, it backfired spectacularly.
Really? How so?
Because before the fine, parents felt guilty about being late.
Okay.
They were letting down the teachers,
Uh-huh.
disrupting the daycare's routine.
Yeah.
It was a social violation.
Right.
But once the fine was in place,
Yeah.
it shifted the whole dynamic.
Interesting.
Suddenly, it became just a transaction.
Oh.
Parents could buy their way out of their guilt. And that's exactly what they did.
Wow.
They started showing up late more often. Because, hey, they were paying for the privilege.
They were.
It no longer felt like breaking a social contract.
So it completely shifted their thinking about it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But it also makes perfect sense.
It does.
And here's the kicker. Even after the daycare removed the fine,
Yeah.
the parents' behavior didn't change. The damage was done.
It's hard to go back once you've crossed that line.
Once that social contract had been broken, it was hard to go back.
Yeah.
It's a powerful lesson in how even small changes can have unintended consequences.
For sure.
It makes you wonder how many other areas of our lives are being subtly shifted from social norms to market norms without us even realizing it.
Yeah, good question.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. What have we learned from this deep dive into predictably irrational?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not quite as rational as we like to think.
That's for sure.
Our decisions are influenced by all sorts of hidden forces, from relativity and anchoring to the allure of free, and that delicate balance between social and market norms.
It's like we're walking around with all these mental glitches, making decisions based on things we're not even aware of.
Exactly. But the good news is, now that you are aware of these biases,
Yeah.
you can start to spot them in your own life.
It's about becoming a more conscious consumer, right?
Tink.
Questioning those anchors, resisting the temptation of free, and remembering that sometimes a simple act of kindness can be more powerful than any financial incentive.
Absolutely.
So here's a final thought for you to consider as you go about your day. Think about a recent decision you've made,
Okay.
maybe a purchase, a commitment, or even just how you spent your time.
Mm-hmm.
And ask yourself, were any of these irrational forces at play? Were you swayed by a clever decoy anchored to a random price? Or lured in by the siren song of free? Because sometimes just understanding why we do the things we do is the first step towards making better choices. And that, my friends, is the power of the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.